There's a Michelangelo joke to be made.
You're just the man to make it.
We have been tasked to find and protect art that the Nazis have stolen.
The chaps are all very anxious to get started. We have your architect from Chicago, a sculptor, a director of design at the School of Fine Arts, and a few other experts in various fields of art.
Hi, welcome to What the Flick, everybody. I'm Matt Atchity. This is Ben Mankiewicz, Alonzo Duralde, Christy Lemire. We are talking about The Monuments Men.
Yeah, so it turns out Ocean's 14 is the worst one. The Unmagnificent Seven. So it turns out Hitler hated Jews, but loved art. And so this movie is about the men, the art archivists, or perhaps art archivists. A battle and a debate that we have consistently at Turner Classic Movies. The only network on television that uses the word archivists fairly frequently.
What's the right way to say it then?
Don't know.
How about artivists?
I like
the battle ranges on.
Archivists comes out of my mouth a little easier, but you kind of sound like an asshole when you say it.
Like integral or integral?
No, it's integral.
Is it?
That one we have I think that one we have a debate on, don't we?
Go ahead,
that
please.
I think that one's sealed.
Go. Continue.
So this is the story of these archivists.
Archivists.
Right. Who are integral to the process of saving art, and they are sort of recruited, almost self-recruited, to go into the European theater of operations toward the end of the war and save all of this great art. So they're like these 50-year-old soldiers who were professors at universities, and their job is to recover the art that the Nazis have stolen and return it to its rightful owner and keep it for Western society to flourish in all of its greatness.
We want to go into a war zone and tell our boys what they can and cannot blow up.
That's the idea.
If you would just read the orders.
I'll tell you what these orders say. Don't knock out
Colonel
old building. Do not interrupt me, Lieutenant.
I think that went well.
This movie is just dull. Like, it's tonally off all the time. And I think Clooney was going for an old kind of rousing war picture. I mean, from the score to the titles and every way. But it just feels off, and it's a drag. And like a good solid half dozen times, somebody delivers some big sanctimonious soliloquy, usually Clooney himself, about the importance of art, and they can destroy our cities and trample our people, but they cannot take away what we've etched in stone and put on canvas.
This movie's priorities seem to be so out of whack in terms of the storytelling. I mean, I feel like they rush through the beginning. You know, when you assemble the team of commandos or art experts or whatever the team is going to be.
Commando art experts.
Exactly. Like, give us something. Like, even if it's just the basic, like, oh, he likes cheese. Like, some sort of attribute per character so we know who they are, and then we go into their interactions with each other knowing why they don't get along or why they rub each other the wrong way or why they do work together well or something. We zip through that stuff, and then we get into this long-ass mission. There's supposed to be kind of these cute banter scenes between two actors, but we don't know the characters, so the banter doesn't mean anything. And then that stuff takes too long. Like, I wish the ending had been less and the beginning had been more.
Like, why do Bill Murray and Bob Balaban hate each other?
We never find out.
We're told that, and it comes out of nowhere.
I didn't even buy that they did. Like, I thought, oh, they just like each other. That's just the nature of their...
They don't even know each other, do they? Or do they?
We don't have
I don't know.
And the biggest price they pay for that is with, I mean, I'll betray a little as a moderate giveaway. They don't all survive, but you know that if you've seen this movie. So when the first person, and maybe it's the only person, is killed, you don't care. You're not vested. You don't know who he is or why that was important. They had done some of it with exposition to try to like make you care, but you don't. So this
at the moment they give so much to like, okay, we haven't made him matter so much yet, so let's do it now before we lose him. Like,
but then there's big speeches about why it mattered, and then it turns out like kind of a big part of the rest of the movie is doing what would have been right by that guy, and you're like wait, that guy?
There's a character where they keep talking about, oh, he's going to redeem himself, blah, blah, blah. We never find out for what, from what.
It's done in a little bit of dialogue about for what. It's super fast, but you miss it, and you don't register it at the time as being important. And then you mentioned the tonal thing, which I think was a huge issue. Like, he wants this big sweeping war movie at times. First of all, George Clooney's wearing sunglasses when it's not sunny out frequently, which is a move that like MacArthur makes, but that character would never do that. Like he didn't.
He's an art nerd.
He's an art nerd. It
professor.
seemed super inauthentic to see him with those kind of aviator sunglasses on leading the mission. It was weird. And then, so there's a moment where one of the characters steps on a mine. And the issue is, will he get off or will he not? And they're these smart, some of them are architects, and they just engage in bad cop movie banter through this. Why are you on there? That's what I asked him. Why is he on there? I asked him the same thing. And like, hey man, like you have a moment that's a dramatic moment that happened in war, that's a thing, and it's completely ruined and it seems separate. I was going to say separate from the full rest of the movie, but not, because there are other false moments.
Yeah, if the idea of the movie is these guys are dressed as soldiers and sent on a soldier mission, but they're really art experts, there is comedy in that, and there is drama in that, and it's not pursued.
Not there.
Also, there's a whole subplot. Like, Matt Damon is gone for a big chunk of time because he's working with Cate Blanchett to find records or whatever. And there's this whole, again, half-baked subplot where there's supposed to be some kind of romantic tension between them. It makes no sense. It comes out of nowhere.
That part, Cate Blanchett's part, I'm sorry, I keep cutting. She could have been played by anyone on the planet. It's a worthless little part.
I found that the thing the movie never does effectively is add a level of intensity, or you feel like there's not much at stake. Like they all kind of just waltz into Europe. Like they land on the beach at Normandy, and you're like, oh, that looks nice. Right? And
Well,
it's like
it's
you
normally
kinda
after the battle. It's like after a party. Like there's stuff strewn all over the place, but nobody's there.
I thought that was interesting. I thought that set up like maybe this false sense of security that things are going to be fine.
That was a cool shot, but it doesn't build on anything.
It doesn't build on anything.
You know,
It's just
bothered
left
me,
there. Yeah.
especially, and I guess that Clooney was going for kind of that feeling of movies from the 50s that are these post-war movies that are relatively light in tone, whereas we've seen, you know, in a world where we've seen stuff like Private Ryan and you know, really intense movies that show a really intense look at the horror of what was happening in World War II, like this kind of light touch doesn't seem to fit right. And the other problem I felt like is you don't really appreciate why it's important that they're finding this art, right?
Even though, as Christy said, they try to tell you dramatically
like they try and
10 times.
over and over.
But they don't. They say 5 million pieces of art were on whatever it was. Yeah.
You know,
Big
like
picture.
okay, yeah, you see the altarpiece and you see the Madonna that was the Michelangelo piece, but you don't get a sense of how, you know, as opposed to like in the Indiana Jones movies, like they don't spend 20 minutes talking about the arc, but like they make it.
You're made to believe.
You're made to believe like, oh shit,
sure.
we better get this, right?
Totally.
And the same thing with the
Great point.
Grail, and the same thing with the stones in the second one.
Yeah.
But this one, it's
And
like
the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Knowledge was the treasure.
I don't remember. I can't believe I came up with the title. Yeah.
but in this one, it's like, oh yeah, we better go get that stuff, and it's and you don't feel, as an audience member, I never felt the weight of import to those objects that the characters themselves did.
If you want to see a great action movie about saving art from the Nazis, John Frankenheimer's The Train.
Yeah, I always knew that the sequel to Saving Private Ryan would suck.
So we're talking about all the movies that this reminds us of, right? With individual characters, when they did something, it would remind me of totally better movies. Of course, there's a scene where Clooney's sitting down with Matt Damon and assembling his team. And it's just like the scene in the first Ocean's movie where he's like, do we need one more? We need one more. You see Bill Murray in army fatigues being handed a rifle. And all you want to see is stripes. You see John Goodman is also a soldier named Walter, who's a blowhard. So all I could think of the whole time was Lebowski. I mean, it took me out of it repeatedly, thinking what they could be doing instead.
I did, however, like watching Bob Balaban get a badass moment. Because Bob Balaban, frankly, has not had a lot of badass moments over the course of his... When they go to the villa and he totally calls them out on the art that they've got and in a very cool customer, like just bam, it's really good.
Early on in the movie, like he says that he talks about how he wants to kill someone, and they kind of set up that he's supposed to be one of the tougher guys here. But there's nothing, you don't ever get, like your first introduction to him is he's basically directing something on Broadway.
Right.
And
they're dancing.
You know, like at least tell me that
You didn't know who these guys were.
Yeah, you didn't
in any way know who these guys were, and it even had a little of Saving Private Ryan. I mean, in the sense that it was the issue is it worth it to risk these men's lives to recover something in the war, and Matt Damon is part of it. So there was, and George Clooney might as well have been involved with Saving Private Ryan. I mean, it's like his kind of thing, you know. So, but again, I felt like the sets too looked like a TV show about a movie production. Like when in the Battle of the Bulge scenes and they're in the camps, I'm like, it just looks like they just built that. That's like I've seen enough. Right. I've seen enough Saving Private Ryan and A Band of Brothers. Like that's not. Yeah. It's off. It's way off. Everything was off.
It looked tacky.
And then I'm sorry to keep going, but then really, like there were so many scenes where we're getting middle of conversations that were all this explanation for the audience. Like Kate Blanchett and Matt Damon are walking through a warehouse of recovered art. And they've been in there a while, they're well into it, and Matt Damon says, "What is all this stuff?" And she says, "It's pieces of people's lives." And he goes, "Who did it belong to?" And like, "The Jews, the Jews, the Jews." And she says, "The Jews." And like, that conversation happened 25 minutes earlier. Like, everything happened 25 minutes earlier. We get all this kitty, and when I get movies have to do that, but when they're done well,
you don't notice it.
And this was not done. This was not done well. Because I expected more, and it was Clooney and Hesloff and who wrote it, and Clooney directed it, and it was World War II. I was psyched, and so
it should have been much better.
It should have been much better. It's just not. I think it might be Clooney's worst role ever. His speech patterns, like his Clooney-esque speech patterns, which he can take himself out of. We've seen it. They weren't consistent with who this guy was. So I gave it a 3.3. I didn't like it at all.
4.6.
4.9.
4.
That's a 4.2 overall for Monuments, which I guess was supposed to be. They tried to get it finished in time for.
Oh, it would have been, but I think it was the field got crowded, so they decided to bump it. And I think maybe they also realized this is not going to.
That's only like 35% on the tomato meter.
That's right,
everybody's disappointed, or most everybody.
Thanks, everybody.